The Zionists have been in mourning in Israel for a person that they consider a great stateswoman, a founding mother of the Zionist state. Her name is Geulah Cohen. And so I saw these articles this week in the Israeli papers.
Yeah, started popping up.
And matter of fact, the who's who of Israel attended her funeral. We've got some video of the funeral. This is number 9. So let's watch.
Right here you see, Rick, Benny Gantz.
Yes.
Current runner, basically to take the prime ministership if he does win here in March, if he's not also indicted along with Benjamin Netanyahu, potentially by the ICC. In addition to Benny Gantz, the chief Ashkenazi rabbi, David Lau, and the Sephardic chief rabbi, Yitzhak Yosef, were both intense. There's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with his entourage, his security. They showed up. He even spoke at this funeral. He said that this is it's the death of Geulah Cohen signifies the end of a generation. She's not just being put to rest of the Mount of Olives, but she's being celebrated. In addition to the Prime Minister, they had also the President of Israel, President Rivlin. Rivlin spoke at this event. They're again the rabbis, the chief Ashkenazi and chief Sephardic rabbis of Israel. They were taking her body up to the Mount of Olives to be put in honor. The same place, actually, I believe, that Robert Maxwell was put to rest.
Now, Edward, is this a Jewish Mother Teresa? Did she take care of poor children? Is she a Jewish Betsy Ross who sewed the first Star of David flag?
Only if Mother Teresa is now considered a terrorist, because that's exactly who Miss Cohen was in life.
In fact, there's a book about her which I have in my library. This is number 10. Women of Violence.
Wait a minute here.
Yes.
The passionate and moving story of Palestine's fight for independence by a member of the Stern Gang.
She was a member of the Stern Gang?
Not the Peace Corps or the Red Cross.
Woman of Violence. She bragged of her bloody past. She was proud of it. She killed people. She slaughtered Palestinians. She participated in massacres. And all of the Israeli leadership
honored
her this week. Now do you get a taste of what we're talking about? These people, like Netanyahu, they're just terrorists in suits. That's all they are, coat and tie. They're terrorists in coats and ties. She was a terrorist who thrived on killing people. Her history is shocking. Before we get into some of her past, she was a member of. All right, so in the.
A lot of our audience isn't going to know who the Stern Gang is.
Right, but before we get into this, so in the pre-Israeli state period, before 1948, she was a terrorist. She was a member of the Stern Gang. Then after the Zionist state was established, she was a member of the Knesset.
Right.
And she was a feisty, argumentative member of the Knesset. And one of the people that she used to irritate was Menachem Begin. And he's not this great statesman, this man of peace. No, he was a member of Bergen. Right. He was a killer. He was a bloody killer. And she would argue with him in the Knesset because she knew that he was just as bloody as she was, and she didn't like Menachem Begin trying to get a peace treaty with Egypt.
Right.
She thought that was wimpy.
That was going soft.
Going soft. She was like, hey, I knew you when you were young and you were a killer.
You used to be the Osama bin Laden of our country.
Yeah, and now here you are, you're getting old and you're getting soft and you want to make peace with the Egyptians. You know, her attitude, well, we got to kill them, So we got a video of her in the Knesset heckling Prime Minister Menachem Begin. So this is number 11. Let's watch this one.
מסמכים אחרים. הלא הם המסמך המצרי שהוגש לנשיא קרטר ולי בפגישתנו הראשונה בוועידת קמפ דיוויד ביום הראשון לפתיחת הדיונים, וכן את המסמך האמריקני שהוגש לנו תוך כדי הוועידה שנתקיימה בקמפ דיוויד.
תגלה לעם ישראל מה שישנו שם בתוך המסמכים.
שקט.
דרך ארץ בשביל הארץ, לא דרך ארץ בשבילך.
אדוני היושב-ראש, תקרא לסדר.
אני אבקש שקט. אני אבקש מראש הממשלה להמשיך. כן, אבל אדוני היושב-ראש, יש לי בקשה אליו. יואיל להגן עליי בפני הגברת גאולה כהן.
אני מבקשת, אדוני היושב-ראש, להגן על ארץ ישראל מפני ראש הממשלה.
אני אבקש מחברת הכנסת גאולה כהן להפסיק בקריאות הביניים.
תעזוב אותי עם הטלוויזיה. לא היינו צריכים שאתה תעלה לשלטון כדי להחזיר את הארץ. חיים קורפו. יש יותר טובים ממך בשביל זה. השלום חשוב. שלחת אנשים למות בשביל ארץ ישראל ולוותר על...
חברי הכנסת, אני אבקש לא להיכנס לוויכוחים במקומותיכם.
יושבים פה כנאנסים.
חבר הכנסת משה שמיר, חברת הכנסת גאולה כהן, אני מניח שתהיה לך אפשרות להתבטא. אני מבקש ממך לא להפריע לישיבת הכנסת. אני מבקש ממך לא להכריח אותי לקרוא אותך לסדר.
תקרא אותי לסדר. אתה את שלך תעשה ואני את שלי אעשה.
So that's Geulah Cohen, the woman that all the Israelis are mourning this week, the passing of this great patriot of the Zionist state. She was a bloody terrorist, and she was arguing with another bloody terrorist, Menachem Begin. But who was she? What did she do? Why is she revered? Well, in the pre-1948 struggle for the Zionist state, there were a number of terrorist organizations fighting for the Ashkenazi Jews. Haganah, Ergen, and Lehi. Lehi was also known as the Stern Gang. So this woman, Geulah Cohen, in 1942, she joined Lehi. Lehi broke off of Haganah because Lehi thought, the leaders of Lehi, well, actually, they broke off of Ergen. Ergen broke off of Haganah because they didn't
weren't extreme enough.
They weren't extreme enough. And then Lehi broke off of Ergen because they weren't killing enough Palestinians. So in 1942, she joined Lehi. She was the Tokyo Rose.
Right.
That's where she got to talk a lot.
She had a pirate radio show. She was Tokyo Rose of the Zionist Jews.
Right, because she could speak perfect Hebrew.
Yes. Well, they didn't speak Hebrew.
Right. Well, that's what she had. Perfect Hebrew diction is the way they described her.
It was Yiddish.
Yeah.
They hadn't even invented the fake Hebrew yet, Doc.
I know.
They got fake Hebrew now. Okay. So she was arrested by the British government for terrorism. 1946, while she was broadcasting her terrorist radio show out of Tel Aviv. June 6, 1946, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison by the British. She was charged with being in possession of a wireless transmitter, her radio station, pistols, revolvers, and ammunition. But she was imprisoned in Bethlehem by the British, but she escaped in 1947. And you know how she escaped? She pretended she was a Palestinian Christian. That's how she got out of the prison. She got clothing and dressed herself as a Palestinian Christian and fooled everybody, got out of the prison, and went right back into the terrorism network.
That's the distinct irony of this, because we have a lot of Christian, evangelical Christians, pretending to be Jews now.
Well, I think you could also say that today there are Zionist terrorists infiltrating churches. It's still happening, Doc. Nothing's changed. So let's get into.
Well, she met Schneerson. Ms. Cohen in the 1970s, she met the Lubavitcher himself, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson in 1970. This is with other former Lehi leaders, and she also was able to persuade, according to the Jerusalem Post, Meir Kahane, another terrorist,
Kahane,
Meir Kahane, to take disruptive action against the Soviet representatives in the U.S. with the aim of causing greater tension between the U.S. and the USSR. A basic example of this, she's causing unrest inside the United States.
Absolutely. And he was killed here in the U.S. He was a very violent man. Let's talk about Lehi. We don't have time today to talk about Ergen and Haganah. We'll just talk about Lehi, which was the Jewish terrorist group that she belonged to. She's honored this week in Israel. If you had been in the state of Israel this week, you would have seen all the tributes to this old terrorist who killed many people. And I have to wonder how many evangelical Zionists went to Israel this week to mourn with their Israeli
Counterparts.
I really, was Mike Evans at the funeral? Let's ask him, Mike Evans, did you go to the funeral honoring this old terrorist? How many evangelical Zionists attended an event in Israel this week in honor of this woman? So Lehi was started by Abraham Stern. This is when Palestine was under the control of the British. It was mandatory Palestine. And his goal was to evict the British from all of Palestine, to do it by military force. He wanted unrestricted immigration of European Jews into Palestine. That was the plan.
Right.
No borders. Bring as many Ashkenazi from Europe as they could get in and take over the land. Now, what they did is that they overran the Arabs. They just imagine that. Imagine open borders and people illegal immigrants just pouring in for decades. Imagine that.
And that was a part of this deal. Part of this deal was actually a potential alliance with the Nazis and the Italians to fight against the British in World War II.
It is unbelievable when you get into the history. And folks, you can do this study yourself. Doc, Edward, Stern was demanding folks, listen to this, and I'm getting this from left-wing Wikipedia. He was demanding the formation of a Jewish state, a new totalitarian Hebrew republic. It was initially called the National Military Organization in Israel. That was his group, Stern. They referred to their members as terrorists. They called themselves terrorists.
I thought this is the budding democracy in the Middle East.
No.
Isn't that what we're told every single time?
They were terrorists then. They're still terrorists today. They shoot Palestinian boys. They're still terrorists. Nothing's changed. They're still terrorists. They're just wearing nice suits, driving nice cars, but they're still terrorists.
Matching uniforms. So
there was Netanyahu and Benny Gantz and all of them honoring the funeral of one of their great terrorists.
Freedom fighters, they call them.
one of their superstar.
They don't call them freedom fighters.
No, they just call them.
So that was part of the funeral. They call them freedom fighters.
Edward, they're proud to be terrorists. This is what you got to understand. They are proud to be terrorists. That's why I say there's no ISIS. There's only Ergen and Lehi dressed up as Arabs, blaming the Arabs. This is what they did in Egypt in the 1950s.
The Levant affair.
Levant, yes.
They armed, gave bombs basically to Israeli operatives in Egypt, and they planted bombs in schools, libraries, and in stop signs, places where there'd be children, families, and they pretended to be Nazis. That was the whole game. The only reason it failed was that one of the bombs prematurely went off, and they got caught. But that happened, the Levant affair in Egypt.
Yes. Hey, to our Arab viewers, around the world in the Middle East, we're learning fast. We're catching on, okay? They've known this stuff for years, for decades. We're catching on fast. We're learning as fast as we can. Our eyes are open. We're figuring it out. That what they've done to you, they want to do it to us. Wikipedia says Lehi split from Irgun military group to continue the fighting against the British during World War II. Now listen, as Edward just said, Lehi sought an alliance with fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, offering to fight alongside them against the British in return for the transfer of Jews from Europe to Palestine. What did we just read?
They were friends of Hitler.
No,
They tried
allies.
to ally with Hitler.
The Zionist Jews, do you get this, folks? Do you understand this? The Zionist Jews were fighting alongside Hitler and Mussolini with an understanding that the Jews would leave Europe and Italy and be given Palestine. Who controlled Palestine? Great Britain. Who was fighting Germany and Italy? Great Britain. The Zionist Jews fought for Nazi Germany. You hear this Holocaust stuff. Do you understand what these people really did? They don't want anybody to know that they were fighting with the Nazis.
They don't want anyone to look up the transfer agreement. They don't want anyone to think about the bombing of the King David Hotel.
They destroyed Mayor Ken Livingstone's political career in Great Britain, the mayor of London. They destroyed his career because he said one day what I just read.
It's a historical fact.
And they destroyed his career. They smeared him, chased him out of the Labour Party, and all he did was quote historical facts.
Right.
Wikipedia, I'm reading Wikipedia. During World War II, Lehi declared that he would establish a Jewish state based on nationalistic and totalitarian principles.
Nationalistic?
And totalitarian principles.
That sounds like
Would,
the Nazis.
Would soldiers, machine gun soldiers bursting into your house at 3 a.m. and harassing your little children in bed, would that be a totalitarian Jewish state?
That's the very definition of it.
That would be it.
Okay, that's what the world's going to look like if the Zionists are not stopped. You want to know why I'm so adamant about stopping Zionism? This thing is the beast. This is the fourth beast that Daniel saw in the end times. We're going to talk about the last days, the end times, the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. This is the beast, Zionism.
Yes.
And it rules with an iron fist. It has teeth of iron. It crushes its enemies. It makes war against the saints.
Yes.
And for a time prevails against the saints until the Ancient of Days comes and crushes it and gives the kingdom to the saints. Because, this gets even worse. After Stern's death in 1942, the new leadership of Lehi began to move it towards support of Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union. So Hitler's defeated, so what did the Jewish Zionists do? Let's line up with Stalin.
They're communists. The people we fought a Cold War against.
And remember us going through the airport there in
Tel Aviv?
They
The
have
hammer and sickle.
They have this big, beautiful mural going through one of the grand hallways there in the Tel Aviv airport. Nice airport and everything, but this big, beautiful mural, and incorporated right into the mural, communist flag.
Yes.
Well, they still have kibbutzes to this day. What is a kibbutz? It's a communist work
Farm.
camp.
It's a communist farm.
Yes.
In 1944, Lehi officially declared its support for Bolshevism and said Bolshevism involved, listen to this, an amalgamation of left-wing and right-wing political elements. What do we have in America right now?
An amalgamation of right wing.
Jews are controlling the right wing and the left wing. It's the same tactics. Folks, wake up and realize what's being done to you in this country. They're using the same tactics on us. Speak out against them and watch the terrorists come at you. They come at you. They're terrorists. They want to terrorize you. They tried to terrorize me in the past month to force me to be quiet. Well, it didn't work. And I'm telling the truth about who these people are. They are thugs, and they're terrorizing the Arabs for the past 70 years. They plan to terrorize all of us worldwide. Lehi and Ergun were responsible for the massacre at Deir Yassin. Deir Yassin was a Palestinian village, about 600 people near Jerusalem. And on April 9, 1948, Ergun and the Stern Group Lehi raided the Palestinian village and slaughtered 107 Palestinians, including children. That's what they're proud of.
They threw grenades into houses without even looking who was in it.
They're proud of that. See, they've been committing war crimes against humanity
Since their inception.
Since the 1930s and 40s. And now they're trying to be legit. It's like the mafia going into a legit business.
Right.
Well, it's a lot like ISIS going into the business of oil refinement, right? I mean, it's just, the examples to modern day are just striking.
Okay, folks, you can read all this yourself at Wikipedia. Just look up Lehi, L-E-H-I. You can spend the next half hour yourself reading this stuff. Doc, Edward, Abraham Stern had 18 principles for the Zionist movement of why he was killing Arabs and Brits. I'm not going to go through all 18. Number one, the nation. He wanted the land back.
Right.
The homeland. He said that they would take everything from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates.
That's their plan.
That's
Very
greater
interesting.
Israel. That's in the plan. All of the land from the river of Egypt to the great Euphrates.
God, you're going to give us that land. You owe us that land.
No, he didn't look to
No,
God.
I know that. But he said, this is the contract.
Yes.
The only place where the contract like that is listed is
Yes.
in the Bible.
Yes.
And so once again, it's that act of rebellion. We're going to get
back what God took from us.
Right.
Because God took that. The Bible clearly says that God gave all of the land that he promised. He gave it to the Jews.
Right.
All right. But later, he took it from them. He
Why?
kicked them out. Why? Because of idolatry, rebellion, all of the sins that they were committing. They violated the covenant and they were kicked out. And there is nowhere in the Bible that God ever gave it back to them. And there's nowhere in the New Testament that God ever promises to restore that land.
That's right.
Before Jesus Christ comes back. It's all made up by evangelical Zionists.
But that's not going to stop the people from fighting for it in rebellion against God.
That's right. So he's got the nation, the homeland, the land. These are all parts of the goals. Redemption of the land, establishment of sovereignty, revival of the nation, education. The sword and the book came bound together from heaven. That's what he taught. The sword and the book. That comes from the Talmud. The sword and the book came bound together from heaven. Unity. Alliances, pacts. Force, military force. War. Listen to this. Stern said there must be constant war against those who stand in the way of us fulfilling our goals.
Endless wars.
Perpetual war. Why is the Middle East in constant war? Because the terrorists, the Israeli Zionist terrorists, are
one of their
carrying out
tenets.
the Stern gang's goals. Perpetual war against anybody who stands against them. It's Zionist jihad.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's Zionist jihad. Make jihad against the opponents of Zionism. It goes on conquest. The conquest of the homeland from foreign rule, eternal possession, sovereignty, rule of justice, reviving the wilderness, this is for mass immigration. Build the ruins, revive the wilderness for mass immigration. Aliens, solve the problem of alien population by exchange of population. Well, who are the aliens? Palestinians.
Right. And exchange of population, making them move away.
Yes.
Deporting them by
Deport
force.
Ingathering of exiles. Power. The Zionist nation shall become a first-rate military, political, cultural, and economic entity in the Middle East. Revival, the revival of the Hebrew language. So nobody knew how to speak Hebrew, so they made up a fake Hebrew. Folks, I'm not kidding you. The Hebrew that they're speaking is fake. They made it up. They might as well be speaking Klingon. It's as real as Klingon.
Right.
There was a Hebrew language, but they stopped speaking it
Hundreds of years ago.
more than hundreds, a long time ago. Doc,
Research says it ended about 600 AD. The last real language of Hebrew spoken. Everything
what it
else
is?
after that is made up.
in Jesus' day, they were speaking Aramaic.
That's right. Yeah, everybody's got this idea that everybody was speaking Hebrew there.
No, Jesus spoke Aramaic.
That's right.
That was the language spoken in Israel, in Palestine, in Jerusalem. So he wanted to revive the Hebrew language. So that's why the Zionists made up their Klingon Hebrew.
And now it's their state language.
The relationship with fascism and socialism, big part of Zionism. Folks, Zionism is a fascist/socialist/communist system. They wanted a totalitarian government and asked the Palestinians if they got one. They do have one. That's what they're bringing to you. Look at the suppression of free speech in America.
Just in the past 4 weeks.
The executive order by the White House.
Oh, there is so much here. I mean, I could go into the alliance with the Nazis. Can you believe that these Zionist Jews worked hand in hand with the Nazis? They don't want you to know it. This is the big secret. They don't want anybody to know it. They start screaming the moment you talk about it, that you're promoting tropes against the Jews. No, this is history.
It's a fact.
They want to threaten you, intimidate you not to tell the world that they worked hand in hand with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis and Mussolini and Joseph Stalin.
They even at one point planned an operation to bomb London. Well, they don't know about these are factual operations by these Zionist terrorists.
And the first time I knew about that, I read that in the London Telegraph.
Oh.
It was one of those,
Afterthoughts.
today in history. And I'm like, what? They were going to bomb London?
Yeah, people don't remember that back in the 20s and 30s that the terrorist operations that were taking place on London Bridge and Big Ben and everything that was happening back then weren't Muslims that were protesting. It was Jewish terrorists. Jewish terrorists.
That's right. They were the terrorists. They still are the terrorists. Now, the Stern gang, which Lehi, it's Stern because it was founded by Abraham Stern, one member of the terrorist group, he has a son who is a prominent person in America.
Really?
The descendant of a Lehi Stern group terrorist.
Founding father of that
A
group.
founding member of the terrorist group. Who is the famous American figure, alive today, very active today, who is a son of a Lehi Stern group terrorist? Who would that be?
Well, it's the former Chicago mayor, Rahm Emanuel.
Rahm Emanuel, chief of staff to Barack Obama. Barack Obama wasn't a Muslim. That was the biggest cover story. We all fell for it. I did too. We all fell for it. Barack Obama wasn't they wanted us to, as I said it before, he told people he was a Christian. He acted like a Muslim, but he governed like a Jew.
Right. And he, in fact, called himself basically.
And after he left, he said, I'm
A liberal Jew.
a liberal Jew. And so Rahm Emanuel, his chief of staff, who later became the mayor of Chicago, the capital city of communism in America.
Yes.
Right.
If you want to know where communism was birthed and where it has its stronghold in America, it's the city of Chicago. And Rahm Emanuel, his father, was a Stern gang, Lehi, bloody terrorist.
In fact, Rahm himself was named after Rahman, a fellow Lehi combatant who had been killed in a terrorist attack.
Yes.
So Rahm Emanuel himself was named after a terrorist. Not only was the son of a terrorist, he was named after a terrorist as well.
Oh, by the way, one of the goals I forgot to mention of the Lehi group, the building of a third temple.
Oh my goodness.
So
This manifesto has everything.
All you goofy, gullible, evangelical Zionists out there getting all giddy and excited about a third temple, you're just fulfilling the plans of a terrorist group.
It's like you're studying the work of Osama bin Laden. You're following his goal points here.
That's precisely what it is. These people were no different. If you believe there was an Al-Qaeda.
Right, yeah.
That was a CIA group. CIA. Al-Qaeda was a CIA organization. ISIS is an Israeli Mossad operation. I don't think there are any Muslims in ISIS. I think it's just Stern gang dressed up as Muslims, butchering Christians to make people hate the Muslims.
Crucifying them in Syria.
Yes. So let's go on. We've got some more. What do we have here on? Rahm Emanuel's terrorist father. For some reason, Wikipedia deleted his Wikipedia page.
Yes.
I didn't think you could do that.
If you've got
They
the right
smear me.
if you've got the right connections. In fact, it was one of the tools that the White House used under the Obama administration. They had some very active people on Wikipedia that were editing items for various political figures. But yes, we had to pull this up from another site in order to find the listing, because it doesn't exist on Wikipedia.
And what does it say, Doc?
It basically says that it talks about how this article is being considered for deletion in accordance with Wikipedia's deletion policy. And
it details what we already said about Rahm Emanuel's father's ties to terrorism, actually so much so that he left medical school in Switzerland to actually begin smuggling guns from Czechoslovakia for the Israeli underground back to Palestine. The interesting thing about that little note, Rick, is that Robert Maxwell was also involved in an operation for smuggling Czechoslovakian guns to the Israelis. I wonder if they knew each other. Another part of this that's interesting is it details again the core component of his entire family's involvement with the Lehi underground and Ergun, because at the top here, the beginning of this deleted Wikipedia posting, it says former member of Ergun, meaning he was there before the split. Rick, they wanted this gone, so it wasn't brought up during the electioneering, the debates. How would it look that Barack Obama's chief advisor, because a lot of people say the Rahm Emanuel
son of a bloody terrorist.
Yeah, it would look horrible. Yeah. Absolutely horrible. After 7 years of being at war in Afghanistan, I think it was 2008 when Barack Obama was running.
Go ahead, Doc.
Well, in order for us to get additional information on Rahm Emanuel's father, Benjamin Emanuel, we had to go to other sources, of course, and one of those was a Salem news story of all things.
It's not the same as Salem, though.
Okay, so it's a different Salem. All right, but this is from 2011, and it says right at the top, Wikipedia deleted the page about Rahm Emanuel's father in 2008. Why do you suppose that happened? And it goes on to talk about an article that Wayne Madsen had published here that goes into details on some of the specific things about Rahm Emanuel's father, specifically that I guess his specialty was bombing buses in Palestine.
Bombing buses.
That was his
Killing
specialty.
children.
Who's the guy on the right?
That is his father. Middle is the brother of the father, the one that died as a combatant. The left is Rahm Emanuel.
So Rahm Emanuel's father is on the right, and he's dressed like a Nazi. I swear that's a Nazi uniform. If I had to guess, where'd you pick up that uniform? I'd say the Nazis. Folks, are you starting to understand why I'm warning you about Zionism? It's what you see on the surface is only what they want you to see. You got to dig down below. You can find Nazism, fascism, communism, socialism, and a lot of bloodshed.
There's a reason why they criminalize even the comparison of what Israel is doing or has done with the Nazis.
Well, part of this new
Anti-Semitism purge.
If you compare Zionism with Nazism,
Yes.
that's anti-Semitic.
And that's in the State Department rules as well.
Yes, but he looked like a Nazi to me. We have this is number 14. This is from Haaretz newspaper, Tel Aviv. Some of the best stuff I get about the Zionists comes from the Jewish newspapers. They just educate me. And then I get in trouble for reading the Jewish newspapers.
So let's read it today, right?
That's it. Okay. That's Haaretz newspaper, their headline, When Jews Praised Mussolini and Supported Nazis, Meet Israel's First Fascists. That's their headline. That was just published a few
months ago.
Just a few months ago. Because I read all these articles.
But keep that up there for just a moment. For our audience out there, have you ever heard, before today, have you ever heard that the Jews were in alliance with Mussolini and supported the Nazis? Have you ever heard it before today?
I would say most of the people watching say no. But it's known to the Jews.
They did the research on it for us. They did all the legwork already.
Absolutely.
They made all the connections.
But I'm going to be called anti-Semitic and a racist and a bigot because I read the Jewish headlines. I read Wikipedia that says that Rahm Emanuel's father was a terrorist.
Yes.
So Jews praised Mussolini, fascist, and supported Nazis, socialists, and then goes right into it. I mean, they do it themselves. Meet Israel's first fascists. They're calling Israelis fascists. If we call Israelis fascists, we're in trouble.
Yes.
But Haaretz can do it.
Yes, because the country was founded by fascists who were establishing a totalitarian government. Okay, Irgun, one of the worst, bloodiest terrorist groups. You know what it became after 1948?
Get ready.
Irgun is one of the most violent terrorist groups in Palestine. After 1948, Irgun became the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Those same soldiers that you saw in Hebron sticking those guns in the faces of that mom and those children, that's Irgun.
The same snipers you saw shooting those children by the wall and then laughing about it.
Jewish terrorists, Jewish fascists,
Yes.
Jewish thugs with guns. That's the history of the state of Israel. Moses didn't come down and establish it. God didn't establish the state of Israel in 1948. That thing is not from God. And Christians in America, you've been lied to, you've been deceived, you've been fooled, you've been hoodwinked. And I'm doing my best to wake you up and tell you the truth about this thing that rose up in Palestine in 1948. This is not a good thing. This has the potential of becoming the beast that Daniel saw. It rules the world and makes war against the saints. Do we have this, the last video of the old newsreel?
Yes, we do.
All right, so this, the old,
Government British
people
news.
would watch the news at the movie theaters, okay?
Right.
So listen to what the news anchorman says in this old newsreel. He's talking about terrorists in Palestine, in Jerusalem.
So this after World
Not
War II.
talking about Arabs, not talking about Muslims,
Right.
talking about Jews.
Jewish terrorists, number 6 we control.
Yeah, so this is after World War II. So people are still, reeling from World War II. Troops have come home. They've had victory over Europe, had victory over Japan. And so they're coming to the movies, they're coming to the theater for the escape. But this is a great way to get news. And this is what they were seeing for their nightly news back in July 1946, a year after the war ended.
That's right. Here it is.
After a bomb explosion caused by terrorists on the British headquarters at Jerusalem, one entire corner of the King David Hotel, a building of 7 stories, was razed to the ground. The stone floors were cut clean away as if they'd been hit by a 1,000-pound bomb from above. Housed in the destroyed wing were the greater part of the government offices where work was in full swing at the time of the outrage. men of the army and the police were working with cranes, bulldozers, drills and shovels to reach the unfortunate victims still buried in the wreckage. The latest casualty list included 65 killed, 47 injured and 58 missing, though it is doubtful if any of those missing are still alive. Once more, the civilized world has received a rude shock at the hands of fanatics whose wanton act is contrary to the dictates of all creeds alike and imperils the best interests of the cause that it strives to promote.
Following the bomb outrage on the King David Hotel, Jerusalem comes under the most rigorous curfew in the history of the Palestine troubles. On the stroke of 6 each evening, all streets are cleared by British military forces and police. Barbed wire barriers are in place at 0 hour as the troops prepare for another night of vigilance in Jerusalem under curfew.
There you go. That's the true story of the founding of the modern state of Israel. It's just a Zionist, totalitarian, bloody, ruthless regime. It's a regime.
The British called them fanatics.
Fanatics. They blew up the King David Hotel. Many innocent people died. That terrorist operation was carried out by Menachem Begin, who later became the prime minister. So again, this would be, if you believe that Al-Qaeda is a real outfit. So imagine, 70 years from now, it wouldn't be 70. Let's just say, if Osama bin Laden was still alive, let's just say 30 years later, Osama bin Laden was the prime minister of the state of Al-Qaeda. And evangelical Zionists, evangelical Al-Qaedas, all right, in America, we're defending them.
Got to write that one down.
All right. That's what you have going on today.
It's a perfect example because Mike Evans, the founder of Friends of Zion Museum, he said that he got his start in Israel, founding this museum, his efforts to promote Zionism from his friendship with Menachem Begin.
Mike Evans is a religious terrorist. He's a religious terrorist. He's terrorizing the Holy Church of God with lies.
The minds of the saints.
Yes. He's carrying out propaganda tactics for a terrorist regime.
Psychological warfare.
So I have...
and they're about to take it global.
Yes.
Yes. He's about to take it global.
Yes, he is.
The operation he's building.
All right, there's your history lesson for today. I'll give you something to think about. You can look all of this up yourself. You'll find everything that we said is true.